we just had our amazing Ask Girl poll, the top 10 questions based on rank. And there's a question from a Tiemans guy, Zachariah Tiemans, the #1 rated question. And the question is, starting with the questions is, have you read up on the GamerGate story? If not, I would strongly encourage it. GamerGate essentially boils down to gamers pushing back now that the culture war has come to video games, which is absolutely and utterly unprecedented and could be the most important thing for conservatism that's happened in the last 30 years. One of the shows that we did today with Glenn and a couple of really amazing people. As I actually don't think Glenn was on the show. It was Clavin and me and two millennials who had. We did 3 segments on gaming that PJTV is going to release as a new series on video games and American culture. And we talked about GamerGate in the second one of these. First of all, before I go any further, I have to say something. I've obviously had a lot of. I have a lot of bad things to say about millennials, and a lot of not about them individually, just as a cohort. There's so much I see there that I'm really worried about. But with that said, I just have never met but just nicer people, friendly, really excellent on-camera guests, very animated, very excited. They were really lovely, lovely, lovely people. And we were talking about GamerGate, and apparently everybody's talking about my hair. I don't know if my hair looks much different. It's just just curled over, doing the kind of heroic kind of. It's highlighted?
Yeah, it looks a little highlighted.
It's the lighting.
Yeah.
Oh, well, if this is the kind of reaction I'm going to get from just a little bit of overhead lighting, then I'm going to go do the henna wash, man. I'm going to get the streaks. I want to look like Kato Kalin. I want that kind of, hey, kind of beach dude kind of thing. So actually what we ended up doing was talking a little bit about GamerGate. So here's the short form in terms of what we took out of that, and it's kind of my position on GamerGate too. I think the big issue about GamerGate, for those of you that don't know, as Zechariah said there in the question, the big issue is can you socially engineer these games? When you get right down to it, that's really what it comes down to. There was a lot of talk about the fact that feminists and progressives were giving bad reviews to games because they were very male and they were very violent, they're very pro-American, that kind of thing, and the gamers pushed back. It's really the nutshell of it. So the question we were asking today is, number one, does the kind of misogyny in some of these games, like Grand Theft Auto, does that contribute to real-world violence? And consistently, the answer we got about that was that no, it really doesn't. It doesn't seem to at all. And I think the bigger issue in GamerGate is, when you get down to the guts of what started GamerGate, is video gaming as we understand it a primarily male, primarily conservative activity? And I think the answer is probably yes. Apparently one of the games that started this whole thing was a game this woman wrote called Depression Quest. And you could probably sum up the sort of the feminist social engineering position this way. Why is it that they spend $100 million on Call of Duty 4 and Depression Quest doesn't get produced? And my response was, well, because I don't need an Xbox 360 to play Depression Quest. I can play Depression Quest on my own in my room by myself. I don't need a big budget to play Depression Quest. And I'm not sure a whole lot of people really want to play Depression Quest. What a lot of people seem to want to do is they want to run through environments and slay dragons, and they want to shoot bad guys, and they want to do things that they can't do in the real world. And so I think one of the things that really kind of just stands out for me is this idea that that you cannot engineer into people what they don't want to do. Video games like Call of Duty are about action, and they're about, they're very expensive. You're creating an entire world and tremendous cinematic effects. They're very, very, very expensive. And so I think the whole GamerGate thing reflects a pushback against being told not only what to do, but how to think. It's the one thing I will say about younger people, mostly gamers are mostly younger, and about millennials and so on is, and it's a very encouraging sign for conservatives in the larger political sense, they don't like being told what to do, and they don't like people messing with their internet, and they don't like people messing with their freedom. And when we talk about progressives like intruding on our freedoms it's kind of an academic issue, and they think, scrolls and quill pens. But when you start talking about things like censoring games, that's something they can connect to. And this is something that if we don't start using this, when I say using it, I don't mean manipulating it. I mean, if we don't start highlighting this, then we don't deserve to win elections. If we don't start saying, yes, we agree with you. We think that you should be able to buy whatever games you want to, play whatever games you want to, and not have the government tell you what's working or not working. And there you go. We really need to position ourselves as the party of freedom. We just don't know how to do it, and it's an utter mystery to me. As somebody here, Silent Gloves, is pointing out, and a couple of other people point out, the number of women online in gaming is increasing dramatically. I saw one figure; it was like 45%. And one of the things we came up with, by the way, that I didn't come up with, but this really neat person named Bonnie Gordon, I think her name was, said was, a lot of girls, and when I say girls, I'm talking about girls and guys, right? A lot of young women, a lot of women like to play some of these games like Call of Duty, but they have a hard time connecting to the game because there are no female characters. And little things like, I don't know why you can't put in, a couple of female special ops people in there. And they said, yeah, then we'd love to do it. We'd love to connect to it. And I think that's reasonable. I had to tell you one other thing, too. The other guy who was on the show was named Xander. It was lovely, just a really, really sweet, fun, interesting young man. And I asked him about this because it turns out, I didn't know this going into it, but it turns out he's gay. And I asked him, because I've seen people playing games online. It's like, that's kind of a gay move, or, don't be a fag, that's a cheap shot, this kind of thing. And I said, does that bother you? And he said, on some level, it kind of does. I mean, he understands on some level how terms like that are just kind of offhanded sort of things. They're not directed at him or even so much at gay people as it's just a kind of, look, don't be, that's kind of a gay thing to do. But he said it's hard not to internalize it, and I kind of agree with him, and I think this is the point that I was trying to raise here. And likewise, Bonnie said there's a lot of times that when people find out that she's a girl gamer, a woman gamer, then she says, after she beats somebody, after she whips the pants off of them, they get a kind of a, yeah, well, I have to admit that wasn't bad for a girl. And both of them were a little upset by this. And this brings me to, I think, is what is probably a pretty good point. And it kind of goes to the whole essence of the whole GamerGate thing. And what I basically said to them both is, I got some bad news for you and some good news for you. You will not be able to legislate down or lecture down or beat you down into, and when I say you, I mean the whole society, into a place where you will not say those words anymore. I don't think you'll ever get to a place where enough lecturing will happen where kids don't say, oh, that's really kind of gay. However, I think the good news is that the way this will go away, because I think it probably should go away, and God knows I'm the least politically correct person in the world, but listening to these really terrific people saying it bothered them, they've got a really good point. I said the way it's going to go away is that when an openly gay player just keeps whipping them, and when girls keep beating them at these games, it's just going to come from experience. And the example I gave them was pretty clear in the movie Glory, although Glory was almost practically a documentary, really. So just to wrap up the GamerGate thing and the whole business about we got to be nice to girls and we got to include more LGBT people and all this other stuff, just to wrap this thing up, in the movie Glory, which came out about 85, 86, 87, somewhere in there, the movie was about the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, which was an all-black regiment led by a white officer, and they were involved with the assault on Fort Wagner in South Carolina. And there's a scene in the end of that movie, the whole movie is them getting, half pay or no uniforms, just a fight just to get them in the fight. But once they got in the fight, that's when it got interesting. And there's a scene towards the very end of the movie where you see the 54th filing past some of these other all-white regiments as they're heading into battle. And these young white men who've always just been considered black people slaves, because that's what they were, look at them with scorn and kind of disdain, and you get this kind of vibe like this whole thing is giant publicity stunt is what we call it today. And then the action at Fort Wagner, or Battery Wagner, occurs, and then this is certainly true in the real world too. and then the naked valor of the individuals in that unit, including the colonel who died, is the only antidote for prejudice. That's the only antidote. You can't be lectured out of a prejudice. You can only be respected. You can only respect your way out of it. And I really think that's so important. I said the way you're going to get rid of these comments is by beating them enough so that they realize that, hey, girl is not a slander anymore. It's like this girl just kicked my butt. And I think that's what the message of the movie Glory was. And to put a bow on the bow, many people ask me, how'd I kind of come to conservatism, and because I was considerably more liberal when I was a theater major. But look, I started out as a conservative. All I wanted to do for the first 17 years of my life is get in a U.S. Air Force jet, push to supersonic, and blow up communists. It's not like I was a tree-hugging hippie. But I remember very clearly, right around the time that movie came out, late 80s, I read an article by this guy named George Will in Newsweek magazine. He was talking about this, and he was saying that black leaders said, you've got to give us a victory. He always said, and Will said, if we give you a victory, it's not a victory. And George Will said, the only antidote to prejudice is excellence. And I think that's exactly right. Exactly right. So in any event, that's what I think about GamerGate. I think, number one, it's shameful. It showed the shameful collusion of the media and the social engineers. And it also showed that comes a point where people don't want to be told what to think and how to behave. And I think on balance, just the fact that the gamers fought back was pretty cool.